What is it that is going to be the ultimate effect of AI on the publishing industry? Well, speaking personally, I think that writers really need to start considering fairly dire scenarios. Unlike, for example, movie making, where the human eye generally can distinguish accurately between an AI generated image and a non AI image. With writing, oh, and by the way, filmmakers tend to be upfront about their usage of AI. I mean, if it's part of a movie that they make, they will, generally speaking, just say so. With writing, both nonfiction and fiction, I think the situation is much more complicated. Uh, First of all, because it is hard to distinguish at times what text was written by a human being and what was not. We still have a sense of that. And, I have that sense quite often. I mean, most noticeably when I'm checking emails from students. I teach EFL, and if a student, I think, has sort of brushed up his or her email with AI to make it sound more slick, uh, I tend instead to think that no, this is generated by AI. And similarly, there are a lot of posts online these days about magazines and so forth, newspapers trying to get away with inserting a little bit of AI copy, and readers catching on to that. But in any case, it is a little bit harder to distinguish. One can't be as sure as one can with a visual image. And as well, I strongly suspect that writers don't adhere to the same sort of principles of transparency that filmmakers tend to. And I can easily see a future scenario in which writers are quote unquote writing material that in fact is not their own, is AI generated, and not admitting to that. Now, in order to protect oneself, especially if one is a literary writer, I think one needs to follow a few different rules that might be helpful. The first is to really adhere to a general rule of thumb that literary writers have used for decades, for longer than decades, for a century and a half now, which is to sort of mine one's own experience, to treat literature as a form of thinly veiled autobiography. Not necessarily. There are liberties that one takes. This is not the genre that is sometimes referred to these days as autofiction, where somebody writes a memoir and then just throws in a few sort of made up episodes. This is something different. This is a work of literary art in which a writer uh, looks at his or her own life experience and writes, for example, a Bildungsroman, Youth by Coetzee, or Martha Quest by Doris Lessing, and so forth. There are countless examples of this kind of literary fiction, and I think that's a good way to continue. I think that's a good route to follow. Another way is to write using language in a highly inventive way. Now, the second approach is a little bit difficult because there are a lot of soi-disant experimental writers out there who like to throw out their experiments with interesting and unusual vocabulary and then sort of sit back and think that that is experimental enough, that is sort of risk taking enough. The way to use experimental descriptive writing, in my opinion, is yes, to really turbocharge one's vocabulary, but at the same time, to use words in a way that is necessary. In other words, that the unique and unprecedented metaphors and similes and so forth that one uses really sort of capture something about the thing being described.